Welcome to the Anointed Ones. God gives a soul a task, not a chair. He gives them fire to go through. The Chosen One. Before you ever knew your own name, the weight of your mission began to alter the framework of your existence. Nothing about your trip has been convenient, predictable, or equitable. That's why it's clear you weren't designed for simple roads. You were designed for impossible terrains. The type of terrain where most people give up after Chapter 1, but you're still going strong. That escalated swiftly. Here's something most people seldom confess out loud. Extraordinary responsibilities do not come with serenity. They are packed under pressure. According to behavioral study, individuals instinctively avoid high-pressure situations because the brain perceives them as dangers. Nonetheless, you continued wandering into storms that weren't even designed for regular humans to survive in. That alone indicates that something about you is inherently different. Not magical or dramatic. Structurally distinct. Your narrative reads like someone who was selected into the league. You didn't sign up for emotional endurance that didn't come with comfort. It was developed amid settings so severe that you could write a 10-season Netflix series and still have enough material for a spin-off. People around you saw you overcoming problems that would have transformed the majority of them into spiritual origami, folded in all the wrong directions. Nonetheless, you continued rising with a straighter spine and a brighter head. And here comes the gloriously ironic part. The very wars that were supposed to end, you ended up displaying what you actually carry. Every detour, failure, and treachery served as a heavenly stress test rather than a punishment. Not to shatter you, but to reveal the indestructible architecture inside you. You were not being destroyed. You were being decoded. As a result, we believe that the responsibility for your life is not for the faint of heart. This is neither hyperbole nor spiritual ego. It's just the fact that your journey needed a level of tenacity, intuition, and spiritual clarity that most people would not be able to maintain for more than a few minutes. You did not merely last. You developed. You didn't just survive. You changed. You did not just walk through fire. You walked away with the blueprint. Now, let's look at why your trip looks the way it does. Also, why has performing the impossible become your unofficial job description? Number 1. Your life got challenging as soon as your calling became clear. Not the exact time you were born. Childhood trauma, or even the persons who abused you were not the deciding factors in your life. The true transformation occurred. Your calling began slowly, then forcefully, as if something in the cosmos knew you before you did. That's when the pressure rose. That's when the unusual resistance began. That's when life seemed to grow heavier. Not because you were weak, but because your future started to draw you forward with a force that required a new version of yourself. Most people believe that selected ones are marked from birth in a spectacular fairy tale style. But the reality is far trickier. When your true mission began to emerge, everything around you responded. People grew alarmed by your expansion. Environments that previously tolerated you. I began rejecting you. Situations that were formerly simple became more difficult, requiring more effort, insight, and emotional strength. Your call was not a soft whisper. It was a spiritual alarm clock. You couldn't snooze. And when it went off, your life changed from regular difficulties to high-level initiation. This is why some conflicts are so precise. You were not being penalized. You were being prepared for a position that required a thicker skin, stronger judgment, and an unwavering identity. The weight you felt was not random. It indicated that heaven had put something within you that needed to be awakened under strain. Purpose is weighty, and once it takes form, it disrupts everything. Your relationships, your thinking, your emotional stamina, your surroundings, and even your sense of self. You sense the difference in yourself as well. You no longer tolerate what has depleted you. You stopped fitting inside formerly comfy boxes. You outgrown conversations, settings, and cycles that once seemed natural. This was not rebellion. It was an alignment. Your spirit was adapting to the grandeur of where you were going, and the world around you reacted with turbulence because it was unprepared for your ascent. Your life did not worsen because you failed. It became more difficult as you began to embrace your true self. And that change is enough for the cosmos to reshape itself around your destiny. Number 2, You were trained in seclusion because the gravity of your mission necessitates ears capable of hearing God without committee permission. Your solitude was neither an accident nor a punishment. It was a required adjustment before you began your task. You had to be free of the noise, views, expectations, and emotional baggage that formed your previous existence. You did not withdraw from people because you stopped caring. You backed away because your soul needed space to breathe and listen. There's a type of inner clarity that only surfaces when the throng is gone. And that clarity was important for the next stage of your development. Most individuals want continual feedback, reinforcement, or a cheering section while making choices. However, your journey demanded something different. It necessitated a direct connection, a degree of direction that could not be filtered via family, friends, or anybody else who could not comprehend the enormity of what was happening within you. Their comments, even if well-intentioned, would have muddied your path. You were not supposed to follow traditional origins. You were being prepared for something greater, something that required a calm area to hear the truth without distortion. The seclusion silenced the voices that questioned you, compared you, or attempted to shape you into their vision of acceptable without even realizing it. You were being taught to trust your inner compass. You were learning how to move without praise, how to stand without assistance, and how to pick for yourself, even if no one else would. That type of strength doesn't develop in congested environments. It blossoms in the quiet times when your only companion is your own soul and the direction that flows through it. There were moments when you felt neglected, ignored, or pushed away. However, such instances were truly preparation. Your task required you to lead from conviction rather than consensus, so you didn't need external confirmation. You learned to move with guidance, not approval. And now, interior clarity has become one of your most powerful abilities. Because if you can hear the truth in stillness, you cannot be manipulated by noise. Number 3, you overcame assaults designed to distort your identity, since your identity is the key that unlocks generational locks. The wars you fought weren't merely meant to injure you. They were supposed to make you question your identity. Every insult, treachery, and effort to humiliate you had one purpose: to shatter your sense of self. When someone takes your confidence, your mission becomes unclear. When someone rewrites your value, your course begins to unravel. And when someone persuades you to question your own worth, they don't need to fight you because you'll fight yourself. That was the genuine onslaught, and you survived. People sought out your identity because they felt something profound in it. They sometimes recognized your innate power and capacity to ascend swiftly before you did. Your compassion, wisdom, and resilience. And they attempted to turn such characteristics into defects. They intended your compassion to come out as weakness. They wanted your charity to seem dumb. They wanted your confidence to exude arrogance. Their purpose was to make you detach from the attributes that enabled your task. But no matter how harsh the assaults were, there was a part of you that refused to bow. You may have questioned yourself, but you have never abandoned yourself. You may have been rattled, but something inside you remained rooted. You hung on to elements of your identity even while circumstances attempted to pull them away from you. And that preservation is why your narrative is still unfolding. Your identification is more than simply a personal detail. It is a key. It opens up routes, chances, breakthroughs, and generational healing that did not exist before you walked into your truth. If the attacker can twist that key, everything related to your mission becomes more difficult to access. However, you survived the distortion attempt. And that is why doors that had been closed for centuries are now open for you. The assaults did not shatter you. They disclosed what you were carrying. They demonstrated that your identity is too precious to be taken, too ingrained to be erased, and too important to be silenced. You didn't just maintain your sense of self. You preserved the exact thing on which your fate rests. Number 4, you are hazardous to darkness because you do not break. You undergo a transformation. Pressure affects everyone, but it does so in various ways. What hurts others ultimately expands you. You don't crumple under pressure. You absorb it, process it, and emerge with greater clarity, strength, and understanding than you had before. It is not that the conflicts you fought were easy. They were intense, unjust, and overpowering. However, something inside you refuses to remain the same after a challenge. You emerge transformed, updated, and sharpened in ways you didn't anticipate. People who misjudged you believed that pressure would reveal your weaknesses, but it just revealed the aspects of you that were designed for impact. Every difficulty pushed you to develop new skills. Every setback brought forth a strength you didn't know existed. You continued to grow even after you should have collapsed. That is why darkness fears you. Your progress is unexpected. You transform into a new version of yourself just as someone believes they have you figured out. The efforts to crush you were not just assaults. They were catalysts. They ignited an inner revolution that cannot be taught. Only active. Others fall apart under similar conditions. But when you open up, you learn more about yourself, view life in a new light, and move with a greater sense of purpose. That kind of development makes you spiritually impenetrable, since no one can exploit someone who has confronted their own darkness and emerged wiser. What others intended to be your undoing became the catalyst for your growth and understanding. They anticipated you to vanish, but you returned with a solidity that they couldn't match. The more they attempted to undermine you, the more powerful you got. You no longer function as the version of yourself that they assaulted. You used the version that came out of the fire, refined and focused, awakened. This is why your mere existence alters the environment. You are not strolling about as if you have endured agony. You move about as if you've been altered by it. And once you reach that level, darkness cannot scare you longer. It can only see you soar. Number 5, you were compelled to leave surroundings that emotionally harmed you since comfort would have jeopardized your mission. There came a time in your life when remaining put became more difficult than leaving the circumstances that had fed you. They have ceased inspiring you. They no longer matched your evolving personality. You sensed emotional deprivation long before you could articulate it. Conversations that made your soul feel little. Expectations have cut your wings. People who were okay with your potential as long as it didn't surpass their own. That type of setting does not ruin you completely. It drains you softly. And while you remained, you could feel your spirit aging in slow motion. Your soul realized, long before your head, that comfort was becoming perilous. It was not cozy. It was suffocating. You were being transformed into something larger than the space you were sitting in. Remaining there would have kept you popular, supported, and socially acceptable, but it would have kept you unchallenged and inactive. Nothing fresh grows in an environment that rewards you for being predictable. You were not created to be predictable. Leaving these situations was not an ego-driven choice. It was a survival choice. Certain folks began to feel uncomfortable as you grew. They liked the version of you who did not question anything. I did not dream too loudly. It did not need them to develop. They liked you more when you were emotionally reliant on their approval. However, when your soul began to push beyond its bounds, conflicts began to emerge, not because you did anything wrong, but development reveals where others have decided to stop. You did not outgrow such settings gently. You outgrown them horribly. It cost you relationships. It cost you familiarity. It cost you the assurance of knowing what tomorrow will be like. However, remaining would have come at your expense. Your mission required more than simply survival. It necessitated growth. Your destiny required you to move away from places that applauded your stagnation. It required you to choose between the agony of ending and the comfort of remaining put. Even if the journey was lonely at times, it revealed a version of yourself that would never have arisen in surroundings that left you emotionally hungry and spiritually undernourished. Number 6. You were picked because you can see what others refuse to see. You've always had a degree of knowledge that made others uncomfortable, even before you knew why. You've always observed things that others casually overlook. Tone changes, concealed agendas, quiet grudges, subtle jealousy, and whispered truths. While some individuals focus only on what is loud, you have always noticed what is quiet. That type of view is uncommon, and it is not an accident. It is part of the wiring included with your assignment. Your judgment has always set you apart, even in situations when you attempted to fit in. You might come into a room and feel the vibe shift before a word was spoken. You could discern motivations behind smiles, tension behind praises, and dishonesty disguised as friendship. This tendency to confound you will cause you to question yourself, particularly when others seem to be ignorant to what is plain to you. But the fact is that they were not blind. They were content pretending you were the only one who couldn't pretend, because your spirit refuses to engage in denial. This website has made you a threat in ways you did not ask for. Others who depend on manipulation dislike others who are not easily misled. People who deal with hidden intentions do not value someone who can read between the lines without being instructed. People that are jealous don't want you to recognize it before they express it. Simply being present with your eyes open has destroyed their illusions. Your sensitivity does not indicate emotional fragility. It is spiritual intelligence. It's a built-in radar that keeps you safe from relationships that exhaust you, opportunities that derail you, and events that divert you off your course. Others walk through life, and I'm thinking you're steered. There is a distinction. Discernment is not loud. It is not dramatic. It's quiet, accurate, and often inconvenient. However, it is the same instrument that has protected you from seemingly innocent traps and individuals. It has enabled you avoid pointless conflicts and walk away from situations that others might be locked in for years. This talent is one of the most obvious indicators of why you were picked. You do not survive by luck. You survive by insight. You traverse situations blindfolded, whilst others mistake faces in broad daylight. And this level of clarity is part of what makes your destiny so important. Number 7. Your task needed treachery, since being loyal to the wrong people would have delayed your awakening. The betrayals you faced weren't only hurtful. They were intentional. They did not occur because you were undeserving of devotion or because you trusted the wrong people due to inexperience. They occurred because if those people had remained in your life, they would have dulled your hunger, muffled your intuition, and left you emotionally attached to versions of yourself that were too tiny for the future you were entering. Devotion to the wrong people may be as hazardous as devotion to the wrong course. Your fate couldn't afford either. Their presence kept you in cycles. You would never have questioned their validity, forcing you to overlook your own inner voice. Their influence helped you remain predictable, acceptable, and controllable. But betrayal alters the chemistry of your soul. It imposes a level of clarity that comfort never achieves. When you are profoundly harmed by another person, something in you awakens abruptly. You start to perceive things differently. The illusions shatter. The dependence ends. Fear bursts. And then you're left with the reality, raw, unfiltered, and difficult to unsee. If they had been faithful, you would have remained blind. Their allegiance would have caused you to cling to relationships that were limiting you, situations that were depleting you, and routines that were diminishing you. You would have continued to choose familiarity above development. You would have continued to obscure your own perspective in order to preserve their sentiments. Betrayal, as severe as it was told you, go away from the comfort that was suffocating your growth. Their departure was not a loss. It was a wonderful subtraction. The commotion they made in your life kept you emotionally preoccupied and spiritually unfocused. Their absence allowed you to hear your own strength, direction, and purpose. It pushed you to become someone who does not depend on others to validate your value or intuition. You didn't just endure betrayal. You exited from it feeling alert, self-aware, and emotionally autonomous. And the version of you who no longer needs them is precisely who your task required all along. Number 8. You learned resilience not by choice, but by necessity. You didn't just wake up one day and decide to become more resilient. It wasn't a motivating motto or a characteristic you chose because it sounded powerful. It was something life thrust upon you with no warning, no preparation, and no permission slip. You were confronted with circumstances in which collapse was not an option, leaving would not solve anything, and giving up would have merely transferred your authority to someone who did not deserve it. Life required strength from you before you realized you have it. You didn't have the luxury of simple learning or smooth transitions. You were thrust into situations that ripped away layers of innocence quicker than you could comprehend what was going on. Instead of leaving you empty, those encounters exposed the depths of your inner structure. They revealed the strength of your spirit. your acute understanding and steady character. You didn't become stronger because everything went great. You became stronger because nothing else did. Despite this, each time you were struck down, you rose to a new level of awareness. People sometimes believe that resilience means being brave or unaffected, but your version of resilience comes from being honest with yourself. You accepted your grief without being defined by it. You confronted your anxieties without pretending they did not exist. You continued coming up even when your heart was heavy, your mind was fatigued, and your circumstances offered you every reason to give up. You kept selecting ahead. You continued selecting growth. You continued selecting yourself. Your spirit has always been made of reinforced steel, not because it never bends, but because it always returns to its original form stronger, wiser, and more focused. The trials you faced peeled away illusions about who you needed to be for others, leaving you with the most pure, unwavering version of yourself. That's why resilience became your default setting, not because life was nice to you, but because you refused to let it ruin the pieces of yourself that meant the most. What most people respect in you now was not created in comfort. It was sculpted out of times when you had every reason to fall apart, yet nevertheless managed to stand up. Number 9, you're calling angry, insecure folks since your life reflected the possibilities. They never activated. You were under no need to brag, boast, or make any announcements. Some individuals were nervous just being around you. It was not because you were doing anything incorrectly. It was because something about you brought out all they had avoided inside themselves. You embodied qualities they hoped they had the confidence to cultivate. You made movements they were too afraid to try. You represented the progress they discussed, but you never committed to your own life. Became a quiet reminder of the task they refused to complete. People were not intimidated by your accomplishments. Many of them didn't even know the complete story of your trip. What terrified them was how you conducted yourself. Your sincerity, drive, clarity, unwillingness to settle, and resilience. Those characteristics highlighted the justifications they used. They were seeing someone realize their potential. Rather of being inspired, they left it on the shelf. They were upset. Instead of asking how you achieved it, they questioned why you were advancing so quickly. Instead of pulling for you, people found reasons to dislike you. Your calling provoked their fears by demonstrating what was possible, but which they never dared to pursue. You did not pass judgment on them. They evaluated themselves while gazing at you. And, since individuals seldom confess when they feel inadequate, they target their dissatisfaction toward the person who caused it. Envy became their coping method. Criticism became their shelter. They used distance as a defense. It never was about you. It was always about the reflection. Their discomfort increased as you matured, not because you were doing anything wrong, but because your elevation revealed where they had stopped progressing. Your boldness exposed their fear. Your mending exposed their wounds. Your strength exposed their stagnation. They chose comparison rather than development. They chose jealousy. They chose gossip. They picked every option except progress. But their reply was a confirmation. It demonstrated that your calling is important. It demonstrated that your route requires consideration. It demonstrated that you are united with something larger than yourself. Their distress did not indicate that you needed to shrink. It was an indication that you were about to reveal a side of yourself that they had never seen before. Their annoyance was not your job to solve. Your task was appreciated for what it actually is. Number 10. You had to develop the discipline of spiritual neutrality, which required you to remain calm in the face of constant provocation. People mistook your quiet for weakness, but what you were really doing was maintaining the frequency that safeguarded your destiny. Your conflicts were never about words, debates, or making a point. Your conflicts were energy traps meant to lure you out of balance. Every provocation was an invitation to self-destruction. They wanted you to seem emotionally disturbed. They wanted you to respond, so they could document it. They intended to provoke you so that you would give up your spiritual rank without recognizing it. What you were battling was not them. It was the energy that moved through them, the energy directed toward your elevation, attempting to disrupt the timing of your breakthroughs. So you learned neutrality not because you were unaffected by the hurt, fury, or betrayal, but because you understood the cost of reacting. Your calmness became a protection. Your restraint became a plan. Your emotional discipline became an unstoppable weapon. This is why God didn't let you win by arguing. He wanted you to win by being still. When you refuse to descend to the level of chaos, chaos cannot achieve its mission. Neutrality did not imply ignoring the struggle. You refused to wage a conflict beneath your spiritual station. And now the same individuals who attempted to provoke you are perplexed. They don't comprehend how someone who has been through so much can remain so stable. They don't comprehend why their strikes never reached your core. They don't comprehend how you stayed unaffected although they strove tirelessly to unsettle you. But here's what they missed. Staying calm was not passive. It was mastery. It was the moment you transitioned from responding to ruling. You were not being silent. You were being lifted. A number. The anguish you endured was not punishment. It was encryption. You weren't just aching. You were being encoded. What seemed like anguish was really the process of writing spiritual facts into your soul. Every betrayal, desertion, and dark night of the soul embedded a unique frequency of knowledge, which you would later easily open. Your wounds did not occur at random. They were calibrated experiences intended to implant spiritual technology into you. Heartbreak encoded discernment, but loneliness encoded spiritual listening. The treachery encoded X-ray intuition. That melancholy contained depth and multidimensional insight. Nothing you endured was wasted. Your trauma evolved into the software that your vocation needs. People believe that suffering weakens you, yet in some cases, agony becomes architecture. It creates internal structures that cannot be disturbed. It creates an emotional bandwidth that is supernatural. It creates a degree of empathy that cannot be faked, purchased, or taught. You were never intended to be soft in a superficial manner. You were designed to be gentle with a piercing, revelatory soul-reading style. And tenderness like that can only be achieved through anguish. Pain did not shatter you. You were initiated. It did not lower your worth. It triggered your purpose. It did not deprive you of innocence. It improved your insight, allowing you to traverse the spiritual world with more accuracy than others. You were not penalized. You were prepared. Every scar triggered a new spiritual instrument. Every loss opened a greater perceptual field. Every cry rewired you to bear the weight of the mission you would later take on. Your mission needed you to feel profoundly so that one day, when someone else stands in the same darkness that almost devoured you, you would know precisely how to communicate with their soul without guessing. You became a guide not because you read anything, but because you made it through something. And now, the agony that once seemed like your undoing has become the cipher that offers you access to destiny. Your wounds were not punishment. They were programming. They were preparing. They were prophecies that had been suppressed. There's also pain. A number. Your spirit received information before your sight. Therefore, you were constantly 2 steps ahead. You've lived your life with a level of awareness that logic and experience cannot account for. You were not analyzing. You were aware long before someone revealed their actual nature. Their intensity had already told you everything before the situation deteriorated. Your spirit had already warned you and changed. Or they made you lose interest. You've spent years believing you were overthinking when in fact you were overfeeling. Your intuition was digesting information that your intellect was not yet able to describe. The chosen ones do not depend on their vision, because vision may be deceived. People may grin while planning. Opportunities might glitter while dangers are hidden. Environments might seem safe while being spiritually poisonous. However, your inner system has never been fooled. You detect intentions quicker than individuals articulate them. You can feel changes before they occur. You can sense the truth even when it's hidden under layers of acting. This isn't paranoia. It is prophetic wiring. It's an internal warning system that goes off before your physical senses catch up. You do not guess. You receive. You do not make assumptions. You can tell when someone's vibe is off. Your body feels alert. When someone is genuine, you feel their sincerity before you realize why this spiritual technology has been with you from infancy, which is why you often felt older than your age, brighter than your classmates, and curiously aware of things no one explained to you. Your spirit does more than simply protect you. It directs your steps. It drives you away from those who aren't supposed to walk with you. It shuts doors that would have led to disaster. It reveals what others worship. It brings out the truth in the midst of chaos. That is why you constantly seem to be ahead, since you are not functioning on the same time frame as everyone else. You're relying on revelation, insight, unseen downloads, and what others learn via consequences. You learn by intuition, what others realize. Too late. You feel it right away. Being 2 steps ahead does not imply luck. It's an alignment. It demonstrates that you were designed with spiritual intelligence for a mission that demands precise protection and prophesy. A number. Your task transformed you into a mirror. Those who fear contact with themselves despise mirrors. People did not mind your presence because you were loud, incorrect, or disruptive. It disturbed them because your energy silently echoed everything they were fleeing from. Some individuals spend their whole lives avoiding the truth about themselves, constructing identities based on denial, ego, and well-crafted illusions. Then you stepped in true, perceptive, spiritually awake, and without saying anything, you highlight the flaws in their veneer. It was not intended. It was the natural result of a united soul standing firm in its truth. You become a mirror, and mirrors do not lie. They do not soften the edges. They do not alter the illumination. They do not defend anyone's delusions. Mirrors merely disclose. And for those who are determined to avoid self-confrontation, that type of presence seems like a danger. They felt naked around you. Not physically, but psychologically and spiritually. Their projections were essentially efforts to smash the mirror so that they wouldn't have to confront its revelation. They attacked you not because you were incorrect, but because they were unable to accept responsibility for their actions. They misunderstood you because comprehending you would necessitate recognizing their own shadows. They gossiped, twisted, and fought because your genuineness challenged their explanations. Every time you showed strength, it revealed their stagnation. Every time you grew, it exposed their unwillingness to change. You weren't attempting to embarrass anybody. Your development just highlighted their avoidance. Their animosity was a confession. People do not have strong reactions to things that do not touch them. The discomfort surrounding you has nothing to do with your nature. It was about their reflections. You were the unexpected reality that they never wanted to face. And the more you agreed with your task, the louder that reflection got. A chosen one does not have to talk to wake others awake. Your presence alone creates clarity. And, although they may detest the mirror now, they will recognize that it is the only honest object they have experienced in a world full of masks. Number, you have already accomplished the impossible. You've kept your soul intact, in a world built to shatter it. Your path is remarkable, not because you survived, but because you didn't lose yourself. Many individuals go through adversity and emerge hardened, resentful, or emotionally twisted. But you go through events that might easily have distorted your character, and you manage to maintain your compassion, empathy, capacity to care, and desire to do the right thing. That's not typical. That is power that cannot be taught, only carried. Maintaining your soul is a marvel. Most people will never really comprehend. Life attempted to turn your heart to stone, but you refused to be cold. Pain attempted to make you numb, but you continued to feel. Betrayal. I tried to teach you to mistrust everyone. Nonetheless, you retained the capacity to love lost. I tried to persuade you that there is no use in hoping. Nonetheless, you preserved your capacity to believe. That is not a weakness. That demonstrates spiritual mastery. You maintained your integrity while your circumstances virtually urged you to let it go. There were times when resentment would have been appropriate, retribution would have been simple, and shutting down entirely would have been the rational option. But you refused to succumb to the darkness that enveloped you. You did not let your surroundings to influence your essence. You went through fire and emerged with your humanity intact. That is the distinguishing feature of someone selected for a greater purpose. You were not chosen because you were flawless. You were chosen because you refused to give up your inner truth, even when everything around you attempted to take it away. You did not just go through the impossible. You grew through it. You didn't only sustain damage. You avoided becoming destructive. You didn't just endure the storm. You safeguarded the gentler aspects of your soul, even if that should have killed them. That's why you were picked. Not because you dodged the fire, but because the fire purified you rather than devoured you. You returned with your spirit brighter, clearer, and deeper, not destroyed. That kind of resilience is uncommon, holy, and unstoppable. You didn't just endure life. You kept the most vital part of yourself while doing so. That is the really unthinkable conclusion. You've been through chapters that most people would not have survived. However, you carried something much more astounding than perseverance. You brought truth, depth, and spiritual wisdom to every season that attempted to remove you. Every struggle, betrayal, change, and quiet war shaped you into a special and vital version of yourself. You did not climb because life treated you gently. You ascended because your task required you to grow into someone capable of bearing the weight of purpose without breaking. Everything you've been through has shaped you into a spirit capable of not just surviving hardship, but also transforming it into knowledge. You became dangerous to darkness because change became your natural reaction rather than destruction. You continued to develop in situations that profited from your stagnation. You learned to see plainly in locations when everyone else is pretending. You gain insight that cuts through illusion with ease. You achieved emotional discipline in conditions meant to make you lose control. You realized that your agony was not random. It was encoded advice, spiritual technology, preparing you for the people you were intended to lead. You turned into a mirror, a warning, a lesson, a guide, a revelation. Simply be yourself, not via force or ego, but with genuineness.